So my purpose is to provide life-altering opportunities and experiences to others that otherwise would have been unavailable, because that's what people did for me, and it made all the difference in my life. And I feel like the greatest impact I can have on somebody else is individually help them figure out what they want and what activities are going to lead to obtaining what they want, and then helping them either through accountability or system adhere to the needed inputs, the activities, the behaviors long enough so that what they desire actually comes to fruition. Welcome to Elevate Utah.
Utah's #1 growth podcast.
I'm Cort Brady.
I am Carlos Souza.
And today we're pumped to announce a few of the things that are happening with the podcast, where we're going with it, why we have the podcast. After that, we're going to dive into my transition out of Aspen and Carlos's transition into being the CEO. You're about halfway through your first 100 days. So we're going to talk about what things you've executed on, what things are yet to be executed on, what it's like to be a CEO rather than just a high-level executive, and if there's any changes in mindset there. And then my journey with, again, the transition out, but also starting Covalent, where about $20,000 a month on the consulting side and a couple $1,000s a month on the annual recurring, or on the monthly recurring revenue side on the software. So excited to jump in.
Let's do it.
For the podcast, the reason we built the podcast in the first place is you were getting more involved with Aspen while I was getting less involved with Aspen, and we just had less time to connect with each other. And so we put together a podcast as an excuse to get more reps in together, to be able to hang out, and also to be able to have interesting conversations with really cool people. And it solved both of those. There's another, for you on the podcast, you wanted to provide value.
Yeah, just give back a little bit to the entrepreneur community. I know that not every entrepreneur has the funds to go hire consultants and to help them with their business. So this is a platform where we provide free content to this community. And I was in that position once, and I'd love to help those that are in that position now.
And as we've continued to build it, we changed the name from Hello Grow to Elevate Utah, and we've focused specifically on the entrepreneurs in Utah. And the reason is so that people listening can, one, be inspired by their stories to such a degree that they'll take action. I think it's one thing to hear these stories of celebrities or people who are household names that you don't know, but when you hear somebody and they say, yeah, I went to UV or BYU or University of Utah, and I worked for this company that you see on I-15, and you find out that they lived a very similar life to you, and then you hear all the challenges that they had to overcome and hear the success that they were able to have on the other side of those challenges, and that they still have challenges once they reach that success, I believe has a greater ability to drive people to take action rather than just hearing a one-off story by somebody that they can't relate to at all. So that's been the first kind of purpose of the podcast. And the second was not just taking action in any direction, but we actually wanted to teach people, as you were mentioning, give good information that could help them refine their action. So inspired to take increased action, and then to teach them things that will help them directionally point that action what's going to lead to the outcomes that they're most interested in. So we'll continue to bring people on. Let's talk a little bit about the people that we have lined up. One of the ones I'm looking forward to most is Kyle Larson's going to join us. And his story is one of the most inspiring stories of perseverance through difficult situations. He had a solar company, and he'll share this story, but they built it up over a 7-year period from 0 to $35 million a year in revenue. And then some things changed with the administration and public policy, and his company, with about 60% of the solar companies in the nation, went out of business. And he talks about how painful that was, what things continued to have meaning for him, and what he's going to do in this next chapter of his life. We also have Patrick from Komora Academy. He is in Croatia right now. He's going to be here this Friday. We're interviewing him. And his story is about finding international people and giving them employment at U.S. companies. We're going to have Jeff Handy, and his company is Quality. They've raised millions of dollars in capital. They do AI testing for code. We have an awesome lineup. That's just a couple of, I think, the dozen.
Chris and Jane.
Chris and Jane.
Can't
Oh
miss
my
that
gosh,
one.
I can't believe we have the Utah mom, Jane Williamson, who's going to be on.
I'm so excited for that one.
Chris at Legends Marketing, who's her husband. And that one's going to be amazing. We have just a whole Recyclops. We have like so many cool.
Shy and Taylor.
Yeah, Scheidler. He has 10 different crumbles, and they're building software for franchise companies. Just an amazing
have a
lineup,
great lineup.
and that's just the next couple of months.
We need to have Cole with Brandon here, the duo together.
Yeah, with Braden, Cole and Braden. Yeah, would love that. Andy Acey is going to be on the podcast. She's, I think, only 27 years old and has $1 million business that is a consulting company with software consultants. So great lineup.
Great
coming up.
lineup. Yep.
I'm curious, Carlos, if we can jump into your first 100 days.
Let's talk about your transition first.
Okay. They both happen at the same time.
Well, yours has been happening for a longer period of time. Just walk the audience through the decision to step out of Aspen and how long it's taken you and the circumstances around that on a high level. Of course, we don't need to go into too much detail.
We'll let you direct. You can ask. I can go into as much detail or stay as high level as you'd like. As you brought it up, my first thought came to walking around that park in Alphaville, right down from the office. You know the one I'm talking
I always
about?
remember that day as well. It was just, there was such a dark, like, aura around. There's just not dark aura, but you were just, I just remember you mentally struggling to work through that situation, and really heavy. You were just really heavy, and I just felt like I was trying to help and I couldn't help, and then I kind of just left you alone. So I always remember that. I know exactly what park, where we're walking. There was a guy behind us. We thought he was going to jump at us. And I
This
said,
was in Sao Paulo. This wasn't in the
yeah, this
in the
is
US.
in Brazil 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's the first like heavy memory that came back. We were in South Africa, Courtney and I. She flew back to Salt Lake, and I flew to Ethiopia, spent a night in Addis Ababa, and then flew to Sao Paulo to hang out with you and the crew. And it was about 5 months after. This was the very end of April, beginning of May. David had started in November, and we had hired David to be the president of Aspen. And he's amazing. He just started taking tasks off my plate of, hey, Cort, I could do that for you. I could run that for you. And we got to a point by about that time in April where I'd realized that I had surrounded myself with people that were more capable than me in every single part of the company. And I thought, what do I do next? Like, where do I go? I felt like I was going to betray everyone that I was with if I didn't continue with the company. And so there's a lot of fear around what are people going to think if I move on, take a step. And there's a lot of lack of adding value because I wasn't the one that, when you start a company, everything is reliant on you. And then when you surround yourself with people, by really capable people, which is the goal, then you're no longer relied upon. And so I thought, how do I add value? And that's when we thought of, well, I should go run Now LLC and have a SaaS platform. And I got a few months into that. We raised $500,000 in capital and hired a team of 7 developers, and got 3 months in, spent $150,000 of that $500,000, and realized that I was wired different the second time around. That I wasn't willing that time to go and put 80 to 100 hour weeks in for the next 3 to 5 years, which I think is what almost any startup takes at the beginning to make it successful just for a financial upside. And that was a really hard learning experience. And so I went to the team at that point. This is fast forward up to August, and went to the team after we had started and just said, guys, it's our last day. You've put all your blood, sweat, and tears into this, and you've been overworked and underpaid because we were hopeful that this was going to pan out and be something bigger than what it's been. And called up the investors and said, hey, you didn't sign up to lose a third of your money in 3 months. So here's your original investment back. I'm sorry, there's not a return on this with you. And then told my wife that we had lost $150,000 in 3 months. And that process was super painful and a really good learning experience of just taking a second to be before having to jump. And I think I conditioned myself over the 7 years prior to that to always be moving, like next thing. And when I wasn't moving, I was depressed. Like if I wasn't progressing towards something. And so after we closed down Now, I started a YouTube channel. We started the podcast, started executive coaching, and just trying to figure out what do I want to do next. And over that 4-month process, just a lot of, again, feeling fairly depressed because I hadn't built the muscle of being able to be alone with my own thoughts for an extended period of time without going crazy. And so worked on building that muscle a little bit. And then the beginning of 2024 started, had this vision of what could Covalent turn into? What was my biggest challenge as I was growing Aspen? And the answer to that was finding people that were more capable than myself and aligning them so that we were all rowing in the same direction so that we could grow turbulence free. It's the figure out the business so that the founder is free to do X, and every founder has their own X, whether that's to golf more or more time with their family or grow their business more. But so many creators and founders find themselves solving people problems and solving cash flow and solving sales problems instead of doing what they really started the business to do, which was fill in the blank for that person. Most of the time it's to create, to be an inventor, or to have more time with the people that they love. And so I thought, how do we go and solve this problem? And started consulting and building a software. And now we have clients on both the software and the consulting side.
I have a question for you there. A lot of people start off as entrepreneurs thinking that they're going to be this Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, that will be with their companies for 20, 30 years. Tell us a little bit about that. Was that your vision starting with Aspen? And why is, my question is more around, was that your vision when you started out? And then what determines what questions do you have to be asking to determine what's best for your business?
So those are two different questions. I'll take the first one first. When I started Aspen, that my goal from day one was to create an economic engine that would fund the rest of my life.
So the answer is no. You didn't see yourself running Aspen for 20, 30 years.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
And the second question is, what questions do you need to ask yourself to find out what's the best decision for your business?
Yeah, if it's to stay or to go.
Brian Fruit was on the podcast last week, and we talked about alignment. And there's this freedom and energy that comes into somebody's life when alignment occurs. And there is, I don't want to say but this bondage or captivity or whatever you want to call it when misalignment occurs. And misalignment often occurs when there's a financial upside or there's a social pressure, whether that's working with a family member or your spouse wants you to keep a job. But there's something that is misaligned. Your spouse, you're aligned with your spouse that they want you to be successful, you want to be successful, but you're misaligned with the problem that you're solving or the work that you're doing at your company. And if you can figure out how to create alignment, and it's not an easy thing to do because there's a lot of variables that you have to line up. It's like the planets all getting into the right in a row. But if you're going to find alignment, it creates this exponential growth where you, what Warren Buffett describes, he says, I tap dance to work every morning. And for the last 4 months, I've gone to bed every night saying, today was hard. We did a bunch of things. I learned a bunch. And of any other activity I could have chosen to do, I spent my last 24 hours doing the exact things that I would choose to do, given the option to do anything else. And that creates so much energy. And I didn't have that at Aspen when we got to that point. I wasn't passionate about the problem that we were solving as a company. I wasn't in a flow state with the work that I was doing. And I think a lot of people stay in a comfortable situation because it's slightly uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And you have to make it bad enough. And it got eventually, not bad enough, but it didn't get this way, but eventually it gets bad enough where you need to leave or your people are going to leave. Mm-hmm. And that's where I saw, like, I don't imagine you would have stayed around forever to be led by somebody that wasn't all in.
Yeah. Not specifically you, but for someone who's not all in.
No, very specifically me as well. On if I would have continued to say.
But if you were all in, I would have stayed. I would have definitely stayed.
For sure.
For as long, because you would have been
so fun. But for me to get all in, I would have had to change my alignment.
Yeah.
I'd have had to become, and I believe that people can become hyper passionate and fall in love with the problem that they're solving that they didn't used to love.
That's an incredibly difficult thing to do. I just admire how deep you think about things and how intentional you are in your approach. And I think that's an admirable skill that you have. Cort and I were on a phone call on Friday, and I just asked him, hey, how was your day? And he said, amazing. And then I asked him, like, what was amazing about it? And then he said, I wouldn't change a thing that I did today. And I just think that, isn't that the ultimate goal? Like, for every human being to live their life, to live their everyday life in a way that they don't regret. I think that that's an amazing thing that you've accomplished. And I admire that, you're very intentional and disciplined. So anyway.
I do feel, one note on that, I do feel like people think, well, I wish I didn't have this. It's like, yes, Courtney's pregnant right now, and she is throwing up multiple times a day. Like, that sucks really bad. Like, that's not the ideal life. But we have two things to choose from. We either want a baby and she's going to be sick, or we choose not to have a kid and she's going to feel healthy. And so I think a lot of times people see their life and say, well, I have this thing that's undesirable in my life. It's undesirable to be throwing up all the time. But that's the trade-off that we've gladly accepted, even though it sucks so bad. Yesterday we had a nurse come out to put an IV in her arm because of how bad her nausea is. But that's a trade-off. And so, yes, not every activity I do I love, but the alternative, I love it more than the alternative. Like, I could sit on the beach. That would be pretty enjoyable. I could play volleyball. That would be pretty enjoyable. But that also comes with its own side effects, its own trade-offs, and its own consequences.
It's more like you're using, that was the best opportunity cost of the use of your time that day.
Yes, the next best alternative was
for your
always,
mission and your outcomes you're looking that you want in life.
And I think, especially in relationships, I know this is a business podcast, but I think in relationships, people are like, oh yeah, they're great, but they have this thing. And it's like, yeah, but if you took away that thing that's like, if you solved that thing, mm-hmm. what other things are going to rear their head that you wouldn't actually find desirable? Like, there is no perfect, no negative consequences. Every single light casts a shadow. You just got to choose your lights and your shadows. And often, the greater the light, the greater the shadow.
Wow, that's deep. Stuart asked me a few months ago, hey, how's we were having lunch. Then he just asked me, how's Roberta? And I said, she's doing good. And he said, like, we love her. She's so sweet. And then I answered, yeah, like, it's amazing. We see the world so differently. And then he said, yeah, that's probably what you want. and just kind of adding to that is a lot of people can see that. You can easily see that as a negative. You know, we see the relationship stuff. We see the world so differently. But what's the trade-off for not having that, you know?
Yep.
So I love that.
So that's been the transition. Any other thoughts on it before we move into?
I have a lot of questions about Covalent, but we can talk about my transition.
Yeah, I want to hear yours.
I want to ask you about Trump and his transition. So first, ask me, what questions do you have?
So you're 60 days in. You gave me a book for Christmas, which is by Bob Iger, the current CEO of Disney. He wasn't for a second. He retired, and then they brought him back out of retirement to right the ship. But he was the CEO for 15 years the first time, and now it's been a couple of years this time around. And you said it's your favorite business book, and I can see why. Like, you are, he's the one who the baton was handed off to. He was an executive at ABC, and then got recruited to be the right-hand man at Disney, and then eventually the CEO at Disney. And while Aspen is not Disney, not making that comparison at all, that same pattern has been true for you. You got in, you went through this process, you filled a bunch of different roles, and now you're the CEO of Aspen. Interestingly, that was your favorite book before you became the CEO.
Years ago when I was in college.
Of Aspen. But it has so many interesting aspects of what does the first 100 days look like? What does strategy look like? How do you take something that's already been built and then redefine and reestablish a culture? And where do you drive the company? So I'm curious, what were some of your initiatives as we started talking about this transition months ago? What were some of your first thoughts? So I'm going to do this and this and this, and then I'm going to ask you what actually happened in reality.
I love that you're asking that question, because I was going to, whatever way you phrase that question, I was going to find a way to put that in. That what I wanted to do is very different from what I've done. So, when we first talked about me taking over, for a few days, I wrestled with that, and I identified a bunch of problems that we had in the business, with the technology, with the people, with the culture. And then I started making a plan to solve all of those problems. And what I quickly realized is there were about 80 problems that we needed to solve as a business. And if I would try to solve each one of them on my own, or with the people in the business, it would have taken me years to solve everything. So what I quickly realized is, as simple as it sounds, let's solve the top of the company. Let's get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people sitting on the right seats on the executive level. Once the executive team is well-rounded, we're going to go one level down, and then we're going to fix things on the next level. So we're now just moving into the second level, the second phase of we're adjusting the mid-level managers, putting people in the right seats so they can solve the problems. As easy and simple as it sounds, that has taken me 60 days to get the right people on the right seats, the wrong people off the bus. And so actually my first 60 days have been exactly on that, just working on getting the team right. And then the second thing is figuring out where we're going in 2025, what our priorities are, and then aligning the whole company behind that, which also sounds easy, but it takes a tremendous amount of thought and planning to be able to clearly communicate to the entire company where we're headed, so everyone buys into that vision. So first 40, 50 days have been that, just getting the right team in place and working on a vision. Very clear, simple, where we're going, where we're headed, how we're going to get there. This is how each person in the company contributes to getting there. All right, let's ride this together.
You just summed up. Tony Horsley has been a great mentor. Has told me constantly, a CEO only has two responsibilities: people and strategy. And you just summed them up: people and strategy, and they're both small things, so it should be easy for you.
Very small, very easy. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can talk. We had this conversation, and you articulated it so well when I said, "Tell me about some of the hard conversations and what those were like." And you mentioned some of the difficulty and some of the blunt honesty, but also the respect from those conversations. You stepped into a role. You're 26 years old. Everyone that reports to you is older. Some decades older with decades more experience. Can you talk through the high level, no names, but talk through some of the difficulty and the outcomes of those conversations?
Yeah, it is extremely simple and difficult at the same time, because leading up to that conversation, you just have so much anxiety around the outcome of that conversation. Are you going to be able to portray and to convey the message in a simple way without hurting people's feelings? So there's just a ton of anxiety leading up to that. But the actual conversation is really simple. With one of them, I just really sat with him and said, "Hey, this is where we're going as a company, and I don't think I'm doing you a favor and ourselves a favor if we keep you. So let's work on a way so we can treat you fairly until you find something else. You've contributed a ton to the business, so we're going to treat you well, but it's not adding value to you or your life or us as a business to keep you here." Now, that was a 3-hour conversation. It wasn't, just this simple, but that was the overall. And I'm not trying to sound smart. I'm not trying to manipulate the conversation. It's really an honest, a little bit of vulnerability as well that I had to show and say, "You're asking me this question. I don't know how to answer. Give me 2 weeks and I'll figure that out for you." Or, the person said, "I actually disagree with you. I think I can add to the business." And then just working to help the person figure out that that's actually not true and ask the right questions. But I don't know if I can, sit here and say, "Here's how you conduct that conversation." I think it's just a ton of vulnerability. You have to take an approach where you just had the courage to do it, and then kind of listen. Just listen. Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt I have a thought.
Yeah, please.
Simple and hard to do activities has been the theme. If I could sum up what you have done over the last 4 years at Aspen, since I've known you, everything's been fairly simple, but extremely hard to do, because it took the fear of other people's opinions. It took a lot of effort. It took a lot of discipline. It took a lot of putting yourself out there. But I don't see anything that you've done as being complex. Almost everything has just been simple, yet very difficult to do. And people overcomplicate things all the time.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that, right? We've talked about the duck analogy where, your feet are at 100 miles per hour under the water, but you look at a duck and it looks as calm as a cucumber, right? So I think I'm not boosting here or saying, but I think that is one thing that I have. I'm usually, things are very complex in my mind, and I just always try to find an easy, simple way to put it out and to organize my thoughts and organize the things that I'm working on. So maybe I oversimplify things when I'm explaining and when I'm selling, but there's a lot more complexity into that. So someone asked me a week ago, what are you best in the world at? And I've been wrestling with this question, and I think this is one of those things that crossed my mind: the ability to simplify, reduce, and simplify things. And on the separate note is, I think people have a complexity bias, where it only seems true or only sounds true or correct if it's complex. And a lot of times, for me, at least in my life, it's been most times, it's when it's the simple and the short version of that.
I love that. As we were talking about finding the right person, we had a lot of conversations about the COO, and on the kind of segueing on reduce and simplify, we talked about the job to be done for the COO. Can you talk about your process of figuring out the job to be done and how you solve that in finding the candidate for COO?
Yeah. So my first day in, I sat down with our VP of operations, who I consider to be my right-hand man in this. And he knows this, the team knows this. He's just someone who's been in the business since the early stages. He was one of our first employees and someone I trust. So we sat down and said, hey, it's you and I. Let's make a list of our skills and what we're good at. And on a separate column, what the business needs. So we listed all of our skills. I was good in sales. He was good with technology. He was good with project management. So we listed all of those things, but the business needed a ton more. So we literally just, crossed what we had out of what the business needed. And then there was 4 to 5 things left. And we realized, all right, that's an operations guy. That's a COO. So what you're good at seems to be a great fit for a CIO role. Let's move into that, and then let's hire the guy. And we're both looked at each other. Yes, that is true. So we just now I'm making it sound simple, but it took us hours to get to that, right? Or it took me days to have that idea to do that. So just listed our skills, what the business needed. Okay, here's what we're lacking. All right, let's go find this person, and that's an operations guy.
I love that.
It was a great exercise. It was fun. So that was the first thing we did. And then the second thing was we put a transition plan in place for that to happen, built a scorecard for what we needed in that person, and then started hiring. But it wasn't until I received 300 applications, talked to about 27 people on the phone, had full interviews with about 7 to 10 guys. It wasn't until our call on New Year's Eve, and you asked how's the search going, and I said I'm down to 2 candidates, and I just think either one of them would be great. If I closed my eyes and just picked one, either one of them would be great. And then you asked the question,
what's the job to be done?
What's the job to be done? What are you hiring this person to do? And then we talked for about 30 minutes, and we wrote down that I needed someone who would be able to scale our organization, scale the operation so we could grow 2x a year. Someone who had not only experience in M&A, but someone who had led acquisitions, and someone who could be a mentor to me. Once that became clear, those are the 3 jobs that I was hiring someone to do. All right, it's Jody, and this is the guy. That's when it became really clear. So it went from an exercise where we identified the skills that we needed, put the scorecard together, gained a ton of clarity with the scorecard. And when I say a scorecard, I really put a lot of thought into that. Just the outcomes that I expect, the skill set, the responsibilities, the roles, and the values that I expect from this person. It's so funny that, business leaders usually just overlook that process of just putting the time with yourself. It's boring. It takes time. It is mentally exhausting. But just put all of your thoughts down on a document, organize them. Okay, before you look for someone, just don't just create the roles and responsibilities and start hiring. Just the outcomes you expect, the values they expect that person to have. Anyways, so identified the need, then put the scorecard together, and then that phone call was, in simple terms, what's the job to be done?
And now you have Jody, and he's awesome. I'm excited to see what he does for you and for Aspen and its people. The next part that you talked about first was people right-sizing the ship. I also wonder if somebody were to go through this exercise, even if they're not going through a transition, if I, during Aspen, had treated maybe once a year or twice a year, treated the next 3 months like my first 100 days, what that would have done for the company to take that kind of approach.
I think you would make all of us way more productive.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Begin again, this idea of meditation and getting, like, it's a fresh start every single day, every quarter. The next part you brought up, in addition to people, was strategy. And I'm curious why strategy? I understand the people side. We got to get the right people in the right seats, first who, then where. But why strategy? How did you come to that conclusion?
Yeah, I don't know if when I was working through the problem, I really thought about it as being a strategy. But I guess if you look at it, it looks strategizing.
You're the chief clarity officer.
Yeah. I always worry about, I want to be able to call each individual in the company and ask who we are, where we play, and where we're headed, and that person would know exactly the answers to that. And that's been the whole process. How do we create a plan to have that level of unity across the whole company? So that's more of an internal strategy. There is also the go-to market and where you play and how you win there, which we're still working through that. But to me, internally, it is extremely important to have unity. I want us all, each person in the company, to be rowing at the same pace, to the same location, to the same direction. And you first need to align the top team, the executive team, and we need to align the managers. And honestly, the managers are your biggest influencers in the company. And then if you get them to buy into the vision, then I think the job's almost done, and you just need to treat them really well and continue to communicate. But yeah, those are things really important to me. I just aim for that. My dream is to be able to call. We have an employee in South Africa, and I want to call him and ask, hey, who's Aspen, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. And he or she will know exactly the answer to those questions. And I think that just creates an immense amount of power for the entity.
I think one of the great learnings from David was being accurate was more important and more impressive than exceeding the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And there is this idea in the long term. You talked about rowing in the same direction. We've talked about the idea of swing before, but when I learned this from watching the boys in the boat, they talked about this concept when there's somebody hammering at the front or yelling out and everyone's going to the same pace. And when you achieve swing in rowing, your boat actually goes 10 to 15% faster with the same amount of effort. And I think a lot of times people see in business, like, how am I as an individual contributor just gonna, if we're all rowing together, just row faster than everyone else or stronger than everyone else? And that actually is counterproductive to what's trying to be accomplished. So how do we work as a single unit? And that takes clarity, and that takes you being the lead oscillator, which in a watch, that's the cog that makes all of the other cogs move. And it's you saying, it's the person yelling at the front of the boat, here's the cadence that we're gonna row by. And here's the direction that we're going to go.
I watched that movie last week.
Did you?
After you recommended.
Did you love it?
I love that part where the coach takes, what's his name, the blonde guy off the boat because he's actually rowing faster than everyone. And he then says, it's not about you, buddy. That you got to get in the rhythm with everybody else. Get your head in the game. Rhythm with every pace with everybody else. And that gain of 15 to 20%. I don't know if that's the actual one, but yeah, just you are faster if there's unity.
Yeah. Love that.
And it's just, I mean, to add to that, just can you imagine, one of the killers in productivity in a company is drama. And drama usually comes from, and just to add to all of that, one of the one of the things that kills productivity is drama. And I'm trying to create an environment where sales is not fighting with operations because we want to sell more and you guys are not delivering. We have priorities. And if we're all rowing together, we clearly understand that the number one priority of the company is this. So we don't even need to argue. We're just going to get on a call. Guys, what's the number one priority of the company? It's this one. All right. So it just kills I just feel like if you get the company unified and if you find a way to have everyone buy into that vision, there's just power in unity.
Oftentimes I love this quote by, I think, Ben Hardy. So we spend so much time optimizing things that don't need to exist. Like conflict management. Why in the world does any company have conflict management? Like, why didn't you get the right people to start with? Optimize that. Why didn't you have them aligned behind the right priorities? Why didn't you define what your core values are so you have your guardrails? And if you have those things, there's no conflict management that needs to occur. That's just you're optimizing conflict management because you haven't solved the problem up the stream.
Yeah.
So I love that you've identified that.
Yeah, and I was going to add to that. And a lot of times there's no call because the whole company, if we ask everyone knows that the number one priority is growth, or the number one priority this year is customer success. So anyways, a lot of times those calls don't even happen. Now, reality is a lot harder than theory, my friends. Yes, and it's not as pretty and beautiful as it all seems, but that's what I've been doing, and I'm having fun.
What are you most excited for as you look over the next 3 years?
Growth. I think we're gonna be, if we nail the goals that we have for our customer experience this year, I believe we're gonna be poised to grow at whatever rate we want. And we figured out the sales playbook already, so we know that we can just, if we triple the amount of resources we put there, we can triple the amount of sales. Now it's just a matter of having ops poised to scale and the customer experience poised to scale so they can sustain whatever we dump into sales. So just growth. But when I say growth, it's fun to be a part of a company that's growing. It's just fun. It's exciting. There's always more stuff. There's always stuff happening. But I'm excited to see individuals in our company grow, make more money, make a bigger impact in the world. We currently had one of our employees be nominated as one of the top 50 women in equipment finance. This is someone who 3 years ago was pretty much a babysitter, and now she was nominated top 50 women in equipment finance. So just that type of I'm excited to see the individuals around me and myself grow with the organization personally, like financially, spiritually, intellectually, and professionally.
We didn't talk about alignment within the context of you and me, but I also think that that's one of the reasons, going back to my transition out of Aspen, that's one of the reasons that people stay in their company is because they don't have a succession plan with finding somebody that they're perfectly aligned with. And that's really difficult to do, to be able to hand the reins off and say, I'm confident that this person is going to make the same decisions that I would make if I were in their shoes from an alignment perspective. The decision might be different, but the reason that the decision's being made is the same. Mm-hmm. We want to make our team members and investors and customers wildly successful.
You think that everyone can find that individual?
I had someone say to me once, this is before I was married, I know that your perfect partner exists because you exist. And whether it's true or not, it does a lot more for my life believing that it's true.
Yeah.
So I'd like to believe that everyone can find that perfect partner that's perfectly aligned with them. I think part of that, though, is it's really easy for me to now look at you and say, man, how exciting is it that they're building something and they're doing these things? How fun would it have been to be part of that? I think it's very easy to say, I'm going to jump in. I want to be a part of that. But for you and I to have had all of the conversations and contractually agree to, here's how we're feeling, here's how we're going to set it up, things in our lives will change, here's what we're both agreeing to, and here's how we're going to move forward, really can be a catalyst to that alignment, so that it is, for me, a reminder of, oh, Cort, why did you do this? Because it's easy to forget all the other stuff of why I left in the first place or made the transition in the first place when you're not going through it every single day. And to say, yeah, I'm here to make Carlos successful. He's here to make these other people successful. And this is how we can best both do that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people see the relationship that we have, and I don't know if a lot of people think this actually, but I think it's very easy to look at the relationship we have and how things fell into place and think, wow, these guys, like how lucky they are that they have this relationship, and that Cort found Carlos to take over the company and Cort trusts Carlos. I think we spent at least 50 hours hands-on working on our contract before as I transitioned into the role. And we wouldn't leave that. We wouldn't sign the contract until both of us had spoken everything that we had in our minds. And that cannot be taken lightly. It's work. It's a tremendous amount of work that I just don't want people to think it's just things fell into place. We worked, we were here in the office for some days until 2 a.m., 1 a.m., working on that contract and working on aligning ourselves so that these would work. So it's just work. It's a lot of work.
And I think it also is easy to go into a negotiation and treat it as a negotiation, but I don't know if you mentioned it to me or someone else, but the most important in negotiation is the next negotiation. And so figuring out ours of how do we make this such a solid agreement that we're both so aligned to it that we want to do another 20 deals together. Mm-hmm. Made both of us approach this as, hey, this isn't how we have it currently going to work for me, or you saying, hey, this isn't going to work for me, but both of us being committed to make it work, to figure it out, and to keep hammering, and to put our emotions aside and say, hey, you can say whatever you want and it's not going to offend me, and I as well will say these things and know it won't offend you, but know that I have to say it, and know that you need to say what you need to say so that we can get those things off of our chest.
Yeah. And you were saying about the alignment in values and that. Don't, just for the audience, don't think we are the same person. If you're looking for someone to take over your business or the perfect hire, your right-hand man, you're not looking for someone who's exactly like you are. Cort and I are very different. I would never do some of the things he does or believe in the things that he believes. But I think
we won't start talking about the election and inauguration there.
But it's, I think it comes down to values, just core values, and trust. Cole asked me about 8 months ago. He said, Carlos, I'm looking for someone to come on as a president or as CEO, I can remember, which now is Braden. But he asked me, what should I be aware of? And I told him, you just need to find someone who you can trust your baby with, close your eyes, like you can trust this person with your life and close your eyes. So I think more important than values is we built an enormous amount of trust over the years, and trust comes from just use the trust equation. I guess I think that's one of the best ways to identify how you're building or how you can build trust with someone. And the biggest thing for me is to make a promise, make a commitment, keep that commitment with that person. Those two things, I think that's who you're looking for. An alignment in values and in trust. Like the rest, personality and the rest, it's going to be different. Don't look for someone who looks like you, who speaks like you, who, yeah.
And the trust has to be on both the integrity, like their meaning side, and also their capability.
Yeah.
I believe that we were aligned, but also believe that you had the ability to go make it happen because you had the track record.
Yeah, I think the trust equation has credibility, capability, and intimacy as the things, divided by self-orientation. Anyway, so I agree.
This has been awesome.
Let's jump into Covalent.
Okay.
I have some questions.
Okay, what do you have?
The first question I have is you know, as I was asking you about Aspen and being an Elon Musk or someone who's going to ride the ship for the longest time, you said that was not your thing with Aspen. But you have said to me that Covalent is your life's project. Why?
This is my Mona Lisa. I feel like every experience up to this point has positioned me for Covalent. Like the financially, intellectually, my network, what I'm best at, what activities put me in a flow state, all of them are perfectly aligned with the problem that we solve in the world and who we solve it for.
What is the problem that you solve in the world? So I'd love you to answer those two questions, actually. What is the problem that you guys are solving? And what are those things? Why is Covalent that thing for you that you just described? Like I'm in flow. I feel like this is who you are. So who is Cort you're calling in life, and how does that align with Covalent?
So my purpose is to provide life-altering opportunities and experiences to others that otherwise would have been unavailable, because that's what people did for me, and it made all the difference in my life. And I feel like the greatest impact I can have on somebody else is individually help them figure out what they want and what activities are going to lead to obtaining what they want, and then helping them either through accountability or system adhere to the needed inputs, the activities, the behaviors long enough so that what they desire actually comes to fruition. And I am able to do that through one-on-one. There's so many ways to be able to do that. But I wanted to pair that with this idea of being in the game. And I thought, man, I could go be a coach or therapist or a psychologist and really help people on one-on-one figure out what they want, why they want it, what behaviors are going to lead to those, and put together a system that's going to help them get it. But I wanted to do it at scale. And as I thought about a person's life, how much time they spend at work, everything else almost pales in comparison. We work a lot in America, tons and tons of hours. The rest of the world doesn't, some parts. But you go to Europe, you have a 30-hour work week, and you have 12 weeks of vacation in a year. It's just a different 8 to 12 weeks. It's just a different makeup. But in the U.S., we spend a lot of time at work. And so if I can get organizations to fundamentally change the way that they think, to get clear on what they want as an organization, and then figure out what inputs are going to drive those outputs, and then create a system for them where they adhere to doing those activities, those inputs long enough that they get those outputs, or identify that I was wrong in associating this input with that output and we need to change the input. Then we could have an impact from a business perspective. And so that's been the goal for Covalent, is to first start, how do we get 10 to 20 customers, businesses that are just delighted in what we're doing? And the individuals in those businesses are our focus. How do we help them realize that they are actually the author and finish, like they are the captain of their own ship? That if they do this thing in their business, then they're going to drive this different outcome, which hopefully is going to leak over into their personal life. And our next step after we do this for organizations, and this is, it's going to take us lots and lots of years. We're going to focus on companies with around 20 employees to up to 100 employees starting out. But then we hope to drive this into larger organizations. And then we want to create a personal use for the software and for the capability. I think AI will be good enough at that point, and we'll have enough data at that point to say, you choose your own adventure. You tell me, Carlos, exactly what you want to be. And you say, well, I want to be, I'll use myself as an example. I want to be an NBA player. Okay, tell me your genetic makeup. Okay, here it is. Or we already know your genetic makeup because of the AI. And okay, if you want to be an NBA player, here's all of the accomplishments. You're going to have to go to a tier 1 college. You're going to have to be able to jump this high. You're going to have to have this shooting percentage. And to do those things, you're going to have to do these workout routines. And the chance of success based on your genetic makeup, and if you do these things, is X. Do you want that adventure or no? And you say, well, the percent chance that I'm going to get into the NBA as a 6'2" white guy from Utah is, even if I do all these activities, 0.0001, maybe no. But maybe I do want to play college ball, or maybe I do want to play high school ball. So what does that look like, and what's the percentage outcome of that accomplishment? And to see that from any perspective, to just say, choose your own adventure, like that's the ultimate goal, is how do we democratize success? And democratize means to make common amongst all people. So how do we make success something available to all people, and it's only kept from them if they choose not to do it? But if they choose to have whatever they want, then they can have whatever they want. That's the most liberating idea and belief for me. So sorry, that was such a long answer to your question.
That was a great answer. And we've had people on the podcast, and I specifically remember Cole and a few others where we asked them about their business, and their eyes would just shine as they explained it, which is what I see in you with Covalent. So I have no doubt it will be a success. It is already growing, and it will be a success. I am curious, though, on the first 100 days as an entrepreneur, in that it's literally taking a company from zero to wherever you're taking. But walk us through those first 100 days, the challenges, the joys, and yeah.
So I've been at Covalent for working on this for 13 months now. And I started off with 3 other partners, $500,000 in committed investment. And now that committed investment is gone. All the other 3 partners are gone. And kind of the lone man. So I guess I would start with that is, when you first start a company and have a vision of what it's going to be, the only thing you can be sure of is that it's not going to actually be that. And the people that are there, it's a very small chance that you'll all be going together. And so that first phase was figuring out, what do we do? And the partners saying, hey, can you be full all in? And if you're not all in, you got to be all out. Kyle Whittingham, the U of U coach, said, if you're not all in, you're in the way. And I believe that in a startup. If you're not all in, you're in the way. And so I'm committed, and really this got recommitted to me or came across with a resounding sound this time, that unless somebody is all in, they don't get equity in Covalent. They're either putting in capital in exchange for equity, or they're all into the business. But there's no equity holders unless this is their main thing and all the other ships are burned, and this is what they're going to go drive to, and this is what they're going to do. And that also means me. And for a portion of that time while I was at Aspen, I wasn't all in. And so it's easy for the other partners to look at me and say, well, Cort, your main thing's Aspen, and my main thing's this, and my main thing's this. So like we can all be committed and to the degree we can be, but at some point you got to burn the ships and be all in. The biggest reason startups fail is because they do scaling activities too soon, the right activities at the wrong time. We talked to John Richards about this, and our first partner, one of the partners was CEO, who we'll actually have on the podcast he's scheduled. I'm so excited to have him on. We have a great relationship still. They do $1 to $10 million software projects for enterprises and universities. And they were exchanging software development for equity in the company. And we spent 5 sprints trying to figure out something with Microsoft so that we could have access to a directory. And we didn't have any customers at that point. And so we said, guys, this isn't going to work. Like, you work with companies that have a scoped project. I need something that we can change day to day. And so we stopped with them, found a developer on Upwork from Brazil, started working with him, and he had an MVP up in 2 weeks. We had people onboarded in 2 weeks compared to 5 sprints, which is 10 weeks with this other company. And we've done more with that software for 1/10 of the cost and about 1/10 of the time than we were able to do at this other organization. Not because they're not a great organization. Obviously they are. They're doing massive projects. They're growing. They're successful. They just serve a different clientele. So I think other things that I've made mistakes on is I think you hire too much at the very beginning. I think you spend too many cycles relying on trying to solve the loneliness factor. How do I find people that will be in this with me, instead of just saying, how do I turn this into something so that I'll attract the people that want to take this to the moon with me? How do I at least have the rocket in the air? And then people say, hey, I see where you're going. I want to join. I spent not enough time selling. I've put almost every single day this month. I've done top of funnel outreach, and it's allowed us to, for 1 hour of top of funnel outreach, I get about 1.5 discovery calls, which that's amazing. And I think we can get that ratio even better. And I think I could actually outsource some of that activity to just be on the discovery calls. But discovery calls are super important. I think the other thing was finding what metric was most important, and being okay being a consulting company and a SaaS company when I really badly just wanted to be a SaaS company. We needed revenue, and I wasn't going to raise, and I promised Courtney that I wouldn't take other revenue from other areas of our lives and pour it into another startup. And so we added consulting. It's allowed us to add value, immense value, really quickly with companies, and get a lot of learning on how we can make the software better to serve them.
Tell us about your early experience with your go-to-market strategy and how putting that playbook together, defining the ICP, how that has been going.
The word that comes to mind is iterative, right? It's different it continues to change. You get sharper and sharper and sharper. I think I'm at that point. I've talked about this before. When you're below 40% confident, you don't have enough confidence to move forward. But when you're above 70 and you're trying to push that, you're spending too much time without placing the bet and moving forward. So at that 40 to 70 range, place the bet. And I'm at 70% sure, maybe 65% sure of who we serve and how we serve them. And so now it's time to place the bet. And we've been very broad in saying, well, do we work with founders or head of ops or head of HR or individual team leaders? And we fired a bunch of bullets to find what stuck and what resonated and what hit. And you sometimes find, this person is super passionate about the problem we solve and for sure has it, but they don't have the budget, or they don't have the decision-making ability. Or this person is for sure the right person. They have this problem, but they're impossible to get a hold of. You have to figure out all of those things. So it's really, really difficult, but we have enough information now to say, yeah, we work with founders of under 50. We work with founders between 20 and 100 employees that are growing their company at 30% or more headcount per year, and are spending cycles solving people problems. They need the right people in the right seats, and they don't have that. That's our ideal customer profile. And I would like them to be in Utah, and I would like them to have the ideology that they want to generate profits and they want to bless people's lives at the same time, and see those as synergistic activities. And that's our ICP. That's who we want to work with.
I'm interested in the process of getting there. We've had multiple phone calls where you said, Carlos, how does this sound? I think I've gained clarity. Just walk us through the mental or practical exercise to get there that I feel like most entrepreneurs don't spend enough time on that.
Man, that's like sum up your last year at Covalent and all the other startups. There's something called the Lean Canvas, which I love, which has 9 categories on it. And it talks through who's your early adopter, the problem you solve, alternatives to solving that problem. What does your revenue and your cost structure look like? What's your unique advantage, your unfair advantage? What's your value proposition in one sentence? There's frameworks like that. And I have probably 24 of those that I've done and reiterated on. You have like the process is talking to people, creating assumptions, creating an experiment, and executing the experiment. Like that's it. Like, here's all the assumptions I have, and it can't just be like this problem exists, but this problem exists, and I can find that person to talk to, and they have the money to pay me, and they'll pay me in a timely way, and I'll actually retain them, and they'll refer me to more people. Like, what are all of these assumptions that need to be true? Because if one of them is missing, if this person has the problem and they can pay for it, but they're impossible to reach, like, it's not going to work. So you got to go back to the drawing board and reiterate and change. And so it's just been, what are the assumptions? And then the experiment is generally just talking to people, attempting to sell them something that doesn't exist as if it did exist. And sometimes you position the conversation as you're further than you are in the process. And sometimes you position the conversation as, hey, I just have this idea. Would you mind validating it? But you really learn when you have to sell somebody on writing you a check, and that's where the learning takes place. So it's just been that. What are the assumptions? And then how do I get more conversations with people? And then what did I learn and what did I not learn? And was that just an isolated learning based on that single person, or is there some pattern that exists between them and all the other people?
Does it ever end?
No, it's the same process you're going through at Aspen, right? It's the process of strategy.
I'm excited that we're getting to that. Yeah,
I do think
it never ends.
I do think on a personal level, you can reach an end.
Yeah,
where you find out the 2 most important days: when were you born, and then the day you find out why you were born. Like, you can find out what makes you tick, what activities put you in flow, and that was super helpful for me going into this next thing, saying, what do I want to do? Because I knew what I wanted as a person. With Aspen, I didn't have any idea about myself. I didn't know myself at that point. Now I do. And so it makes this next round of, even if this would make money going this way, it's not what aligns with me. Mm-hmm. And so, for better or worse, I now have another anchor point of, it's got to align with me, and it has to align with all of these other things. But no, you're doing the same thing.
Exactly. And I was gonna touch on that. We recently had a board meeting, and this is what we talked about. How do we gain clarity on what is our core business at Aspen? And then I asked the question, because my immediate thought was, I'm gonna put the whole executive team on a hotel over 2 days, and we're only gonna leave that room when we're ready, when we have the answer to this. And then the board, everyone basically said the same thing. No, I don't think that works. You just always have to be asking that question. How many years did it take American Express to figure out that they were not a bank? They're a payments company. How many years did Apple take to figure out that they were not a CPU computer company? They're a product design, technology design company. So it's just keep asking the question. Just don't feel like once you've nailed your ICP, that work's done. All right, let's go to market. every day. Keep making it better. There will be oscillations. Some days you have more clarity. Some days you're going to hit rock bottom. Like, dang it, I don't know. I just feel like we're not clear. But just know that over time, you're going in the right direction if you keep on asking the right questions. Keep surrounding yourself with people who are just not giving you the answers you want, but people who are actually like thinking with you, wanting your success, and then ask them the questions and spend the mental bandwidth figuring out the answer to those questions. I think that will serve you really well.
And some of that stuff from an outsider's perspective looks very unproductive. Taking a hike, playing basketball, playing soccer, going on a vacation, lifting, running. Obviously, that has to be in conjunction with a ton of reps, spending time talking to the people that you're actually going to sell. But if you only are talking to the people that you're wanting to sell and you stop thinking, or if you're only thinking in this vacuum and not talking to the people that you want to be your customers, you're not going to find the right answer.
I love that. I think somehow this is coming to my mind right now, and outside of speaking with who you think your customer is, and outside of that, just find the group of people in your personal life who you can commiserate with, reason with, and help you work through some of those challenges. This is just a simple example. We just came back from a trip a couple of weeks ago with 8 guys, and I am still processing things that I learned from everyone. And I'm like almost overwhelmed with the amount of discomfort that I went through, like mental discomfort that I went through with that group. And I just think that, I don't know, I just know too many people who their surroundings are people who are saying things that they want to hear. And that won't get us anywhere. So on top of all that, you're working hard on the business. You're talking you're talking to your potential customers, but have a network outside of that, which make yourself look like an idiot. Reach out to people that you don't know, that will be mentors to you, but also find a network outside of that who will help you just wrestle with some of those thoughts and work through some of those things, and you can just commiserate with and help those people too. It's just not about getting help. Anyways, I don't know why that came to mind. I hope that somehow fits into what we're talking about. But I think you have that. I see that you have probably one of the biggest networks I've ever seen anyone have, and I can't imagine that you haven't called. I know you've called me, but I'm pretty sure you've called the guys from that group or the guys on your basketball team just to ask questions about this and just bounce ideas off of each other. So I don't know how that fits into it all, but I think it's really important.
I think
in
the
this
alternative
process.
to that is being surrounded by, they call it the mom test. There's a book called The Mom Test. If you ask your mom if your idea is great, she's going to say yes, right? You're her kid. She doesn't want to hurt your feelings and make you feel bad. And that flows through into everyone else that knows you. Hey, I'm doing this thing. Oh, amazing. Like, I'm cheering for you. I'm rooting for you. But they're not asking you the hard questions. They're saying, hey, that's one of the worst ideas I've ever had. And then putting you in a position where you have to defend the idea and explain why it's not a bad idea. One of my favorite questions that I've asked in all of these conversations is, at the very end, I'll say, thanks for taking the time to listen to this, to give me feedback. Hypothetically, if we were to chat 3 years from now and we didn't talk at all over those next 3 years, and you said, hey, Cort, how's Covalent? And I said, man, it failed. In your opinion, what's your best guess as to the reason I would give to why it failed? And I've gotten some of the best feedback. Well, you probably didn't niche down fast enough, or you probably weren't able to get users to actually use the software. You're probably able to sell companies, but you probably couldn't get people to actually take the time to enter their data, or X. And then you have this massive list of all of the reasons why your company would fail. And then if you can go and solve those, okay, well, how do I how do I get people to actually use the software and make it addictive? Like, what I'm thinking about Duolingo, I'm thinking about social media. How do we integrate that into the software, those methods and principles, so that people are hyped to use our software and get a dopamine release when they're achieving and accomplishing things? It's been some of the greatest feedback that I've gotten, and it allows the person to answer that question without them feeling like they're tearing you down.
I love that. I've learned to love people who are like that in my life. And those are the people who I appreciate the most. I actually introduced our COO to the team today, and he introduced himself and he said, I'm a Miami Dolphins fan. And immediately the team was like, oh, that's why Carlos hired you, because that's the Jets' biggest rival. And Carlos just loves people who challenges him and thinks the opposite of what he thinks. That's, of course, it was a joke, but I just learned to love people who are, who are like that in my life, and it's helped me a ton.
Well, Carlos, this has been an awesome episode. Thanks for the questions, brother. Excited to
Thank
see
you.
what the rest of the next 100 days looks like in the next 3 years.
Can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
What is one question that you wish I had asked today? What's on your mind?
I think the question that I like getting asked the most, 2 questions. If nothing changes, what's the most likely outcome? And then 2, what's the most potent next step that you can take? And if you were to ask me what's the most potent next step that you could take in driving Covalent's mission forward, it would be, I feel like I'm already clear on who our ICP is, but to go down to a microscopic level of who's the one person that I'm going to build the perfect solution for, and what is a pain that they're experiencing on a regular basis that I can tell a story that emotionally pulls that pain out of them so that we can relate with each other in the first 30 seconds of a conversation. That's the most potent next step that I can take to drive Covalent's mission forward. And to do that likely means getting out of the office, getting alone with a notebook, away from technology, and writing that down.
Love it.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks, man. Thanks for being such a meaningful and what's the word that we've been using?
Accretive?
Sure. Yeah, that works. Just super meaningful in everything you touch. I just think that's admirable. Appreciate this conversation. It's been good.
Grateful to do the podcast with you, and grateful to, and so is the rest of the team, to have you leading Aspen.
Yeah, it's going to be challenging and fun. It's a wrap.